Marcus had always believed that good neighbors made for a peaceful community. After 15 years of living in Willowbrook Heights, a well-maintained suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and manicured lawns, he thought he knew what to expect from his fellow residents. The homeowners association kept things orderly, and most people minded their own business while maintaining their properties to reasonable standards. That peaceful existence came to an abrupt end on a Tuesday morning in early September, when Marcus noticed something odd about his monthly electric bill. The amount was nearly double what he typically paid, despite using the same appliances and maintaining his usual routines. He stared at the numbers on the statement, wondering if there had been some kind of billing error, or if one of his major appliances was malfunctioning. Marcus called the electric company, expecting a quick explanation and possibly a corrected bill. The customer service representative pulled up his account and confirmed that the readings were accurate. The meter showed significant additional usage during overnight hours, particularly between midnight and 6 in the morning. This struck Marcus as extremely strange since he was typically asleep during those hours, with only his refrigerator, security system, and a few other minimal devices drawing power. Concerned about a possible electrical problem that could pose a safety risk, Marcus decided to investigate. He walked around his property that evening, checking for any obvious issues with his outdoor lighting or electrical connections. Everything appeared normal, but as he rounded the corner near his garage, he noticed something that made him pause. His next-door neighbor, Linda Patterson, was crouched near the side of his house where his outdoor electrical outlet was located. She appeared to be connecting something to the outlet, though it was difficult to see exactly what in the dim lighting. Marcus watched quietly for a moment, unsure whether to approach or observe what she was doing. Linda was a relatively new resident who had moved in about 8 months earlier. She served on the HOA board and had quickly established herself as someone who paid close attention to neighborhood activities. She was the type of person who noticed when trash cans stayed out too long after pickup day, or when someone's grass grew slightly higher than the community standards suggested. Marcus had always been cordial with her, though he found her intense focus on rule enforcement somewhat excessive. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Marcus could make out an extension cord running from his outlet across the small strip of grass that separated their properties. The cord disappeared into Linda's garage through a gap near the door. He realized that she was essentially stealing electricity from his home, using his power supply for whatever she had plugged in on her side of the property line. Marcus felt a surge of disbelief and anger. Not only was Linda taking his electricity without permission, but she was also trespassing on his property to do so. The fact that she was doing this secretly, under cover of darkness, made it even more infuriating. He had been paying for her electrical usage without even knowing it, which explained the dramatic increase in his monthly bills. Rather than confronting Linda immediately, Marcus decided to observe her routine for a few more nights to understand the full scope of what was happening. He positioned himself at his bedroom window, which offered a clear view of the area where Linda had been working. Sure enough, she appeared again the following night around 11:30, quietly connecting her extension cord to his outlet before disappearing back into her garage. On the third night of observation, Marcus discovered exactly what Linda was powering with his electricity. As she opened her garage door wider to maneuver the extension cord, he could clearly see a sleek white Tesla Model S parked inside. She was using his power supply to charge her expensive electric vehicle, essentially making him pay for her transportation cost without his knowledge or consent. The revelation added another layer to Marcus's growing frustration. Linda drove an expensive luxury car, but was apparently too cheap to pay for the electricity needed to keep it running. Instead, she had devised a scheme to steal power from her neighbor, banking on the fact that he might not notice the increased usage or would assume it was due to other factors. Marcus began researching the cost of charging a Tesla and was shocked to learn how much electricity the process required. A full charge could cost anywhere from $10 to $20, depending on local utility rates and the size of the battery. If Linda was charging her car several times per week using his power, she could easily be stealing hundreds of dollars worth of electricity each month. The more Marcus thought about the situation, the angrier he became. Linda's actions weren't just theft. They were a violation of trust between neighbors. She smiled and waved at him when they passed on the street. participated in neighborhood meetings where she advocated for community standards and proper behavior, and even sent him a fruit basket when he had been sick with the flu earlier that year. Meanwhile, she was literally stealing from him under cover of darkness, inflating his electric bills while saving money on her own expensive lifestyle choices. The hypocrisy was staggering, especially coming from someone who positioned herself as a guardian of neighborhood values and proper conduct. Marcus knew he needed to address the situation, but he wanted to be strategic about his approach. Simply confronting Linda might result in her denying the theft, or finding more creative ways to continue stealing his electricity. He needed evidence and a plan that would put a stop to her behavior, while ensuring she faced appropriate consequences for her actions. As he lay in bed that night, watching Linda once again connect her cord to his outlet, Marcus began formulating a response that would teach his dishonest neighbor a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. The time for passive observation was ending, and the time for action was about to begin. Marcus spent the next few days researching his options and documenting Linda's theft with photographs and video recordings. He used his smartphone to capture footage of her connecting the extension cord to his outlet and running it back to her garage where the Tesla was parked. The evidence was clear and undeniable, showing not only the theft itself but also Linda's deliberate and repeated pattern of behavior. His first instinct was to call the police and report the theft, but Marcus decided to try a more diplomatic approach initially. After all, they were neighbors who would have to continue living next to each other regardless of how this situation was resolved. He hoped that a direct conversation might solve the problem without involving law enforcement or creating long-term animosity between them. On Thursday evening, Marcus waited until he saw Linda return home from work before walking over to knock on her front door. She answered with her usual friendly smile, asking how his day had been and commenting on the pleasant weather they had been enjoying. Marcus found her cheerful demeanor almost surreal, given what he knew about her nighttime activities. Marcus explained that he had noticed some unusual activity around his electrical outlet and wondered if she knew anything about it. Linda's expression remained neutral, but he could see a slight tension in her posture as she claimed to have no knowledge of any problems with his electrical system. She suggested that he might want to have an electrician check for faulty wiring or malfunctioning appliances. When Marcus mentioned that he had actually observed someone using his outlet to power equipment in her garage, Linda's demeanor shifted noticeably. She became defensive, claiming that she had every right to use any electrical outlets that were accessible from her property. She argued that the outlet was close to the property line and that she wasn't technically trespassing since she could reach it without stepping onto his land. Marcus calmly explained that regardless of the outlet's location, it was connected to his electrical panel, and he was paying for any power consumed through it. He told Linda that his electric bills had nearly doubled since she began charging her Tesla with his electricity, and that he expected her to either stop immediately or reimburse him for the stolen power. Linda's response was both shocking and infuriating. Rather than apologizing or agreeing to stop, she became argumentative and tried to turn the situation around on Marcus. She claimed that as a member of the HOA board, she was simply conducting routine inspections to ensure that all electrical installations met community safety standards. She suggested that Marcus should be grateful for her vigilance rather than complaining about her activities. The conversation escalated, as Linda insisted that the small amount of electricity she was using couldn't possibly account for Marcus's increased bills. She implied that he was probably wasting energy in other ways and looking for someone else to blame for his poor resource management. Her condescending tone and refusal to take responsibility for her actions made it clear that a diplomatic resolution was not going to be possible. Marcus left the conversation feeling frustrated, but also more determined to address the situation decisively. Linda had not only refused to stop stealing his electricity, but had also tried to gaslight him into believing that he was the problem. Her abuse of her HOA position to justify her behavior was particularly galling, as she was supposed to be protecting the community's interests rather than exploiting her neighbors. The next morning, Marcus contacted his electric company to report the theft and ask about his options. The customer service representative explained that utility theft was indeed a crime, and that they could install a lockable cover on his outdoor outlet to prevent unauthorized access. However, This solution would take several weeks to arrange and would require Marcus to pay for the installation. Marcus also called the local police non-emergency line to understand the legal implications of Linda's actions. The officer he spoke with confirmed that using someone else's electricity without permission was theft, regardless of how accessible the outlet might be. However, prosecuting such cases could be complicated and time-consuming, often resulting in minimal consequences for the perpetrator. Frustrated by the slow pace of official channels, Marcus began researching alternative solutions. He discovered that there were various devices available that could protect electrical outlets from unauthorized use, ranging from simple locking covers to more sophisticated systems that could detect unusual power draws and automatically shut off service. As he browsed through different options online, Marcus came across discussions about power conditioning and surge protection systems. Some of these devices were designed to regulate the flow of electricity and protect sensitive equipment from power fluctuations. Others could be configured to detect specific usage patterns and respond accordingly. An idea began forming in Marcus's mind as he read about these electrical protection systems. If Linda was going to continue stealing his electricity, despite his direct request that she stop, perhaps he could find a way to make that theft much more expensive for her than simply paying for her own power. Marcus spent considerable time researching the electrical requirements of Tesla charging systems and the potential vulnerabilities that might exist in the charging process. He learned that electric vehicle batteries were sensitive to power fluctuations, and that improper charging could cause significant damage to the battery system, potentially requiring thousands of dollars in repairs or replacement. The more Marcus learned about electric vehicle charging systems, the more he realized that Linda was not only stealing his electricity, but also putting both of their properties at risk. Her makeshift charging setup using an extension cord was not designed for the high power demands of electric vehicle charging and could potentially cause electrical fires or other safety hazards. This safety concern gave Marcus additional justification for taking action to protect his property and the neighborhood. He wasn't just dealing with a simple theft anymore. He was addressing a potentially dangerous situation that Linda had created through her reckless and illegal behavior. By the end of the week, Marcus had developed a plan that would address both the theft and the safety issues, while teaching Linda an expensive lesson about the consequences of stealing from her neighbors. He began ordering the equipment he would need to implement his solution, confident that his response would be both effective and entirely legal. Marcus spent the weekend researching electrical surge protection devices and power conditioning systems. His background in electronics from his college engineering courses proved invaluable as he studied the technical specifications and installation requirements for various devices. He wasn't looking for anything illegal or dangerous, but rather a legitimate electrical protection system that would make unauthorized use of his outlet problematic for anyone trying to steal his power. After extensive research, Marcus found exactly what he needed: a commercial-grade power conditioning unit designed to protect sensitive equipment from electrical fluctuations. The device was typically used in industrial settings to safeguard expensive machinery from power surges, voltage drops, and other electrical anomalies that could cause damage. What made this particular unit perfect for his situation was its ability to detect unauthorized or improper electrical loads and respond by creating controlled power fluctuations that would discourage misuse. The system included sophisticated monitoring capabilities that could differentiate between normal household electrical usage and the high-demand charging patterns typical of electric vehicles. When it detected an unauthorized high-draw device, the unit would generate precisely controlled voltage spikes and fluctuations that would make charging difficult or impossible without causing any permanent damage to Marcus's own electrical system. Marcus ordered the power conditioning unit along with the necessary installation components. The total cost was significant, nearly $800, but he considered it a worthwhile investment in protecting his property and teaching Linda an expensive lesson about respecting other people's belongings. The device would also provide legitimate protection for his own electrical system, making it a justifiable purchase regardless of the situation with his neighbor. While waiting for the equipment to arrive, Marcus continued documenting Linda's theft with photographs and video recordings. He wanted to have comprehensive evidence of her pattern of behavior, in case the situation escalated and legal action became necessary. Each night, like clockwork, Linda would emerge from her house around 11:30 and connect her extension cord to his outlet, remaining outside just long enough to ensure the connection was secure before returning to her garage. Marcus also began researching Linda's background and her role on the HOA board. He discovered that she had been elected to the board shortly after moving to the neighborhood, running on a platform of maintaining community standards and ensuring that all residents followed the established rules and regulations. The irony of her position was not lost on Marcus, as she was simultaneously violating both community trust and state laws regarding utility theft. Through conversations with other neighbors, Marcus learned that Linda had been increasingly aggressive in her enforcement of HOA rules. She had sent violation notices to residents for minor infractions like leaving trash cans out too long or allowing grass to grow slightly above the prescribed height limits. Several neighbors mentioned that they found her approach unnecessarily harsh and that she seemed to take pleasure in catching people in small violations of community standards. This information reinforced Marcus's belief that Linda's behavior toward him was part of a larger pattern of entitlement and disregard for others. She expected everyone else to follow rules strictly while exempting herself from basic standards of honesty and respect for private property. Her position on the HOA board had apparently given her an inflated sense of authority that she was now abusing in multiple ways. The power conditioning equipment arrived on Wednesday, and Marcus spent Thursday evening carefully installing the system according to the manufacturer's instructions. The installation required him to connect the device between his main electrical panel and the outdoor outlet that Linda had been using. The process was complex enough that he had to work slowly and carefully, but his engineering background made it manageable. Once the installation was complete, Marcus tested the system thoroughly to ensure it was working properly. The device included a control panel that allowed him to monitor electrical usage and adjust the response parameters for different types of unauthorized access. He configured the system to detect the specific power draw patterns associated with electric vehicle charging and to respond with controlled voltage fluctuations that would make such charging ineffective. The beauty of Marcus's solution was that it was completely legal and actually provided legitimate protection for his electrical system. The power conditioning unit was designed to prevent damage from electrical anomalies, and unauthorized use of his outlet certainly qualified as an electrical anomaly that needed to be controlled. If anyone questioned his installation of the device, he could honestly explain that he was protecting his property from electrical theft and potential safety hazards. Friday night arrived, and Marcus positioned himself at his bedroom window to observe Linda's reaction when she discovered that her free electricity source was no longer functioning properly. As usual, she appeared around 11:30 and connected her extension cord to his outlet. Marcus watched as she returned to her garage and presumably attempted to begin charging her Tesla. Within minutes, Linda emerged from her garage with a confused expression on her face. She walked back to Marcus's outlet and checked the connection, unplugging and reconnecting the cord several times. Marcus could see her frustration growing as she realized that something had changed with the power supply she had been stealing. The power conditioning unit was working exactly as intended. When Linda's Tesla attempted to draw the high current required for charging, the system detected the unauthorized usage and began generating controlled voltage fluctuations. These fluctuations were not dangerous, but they made effective charging impossible by constantly varying the power supply in ways that the vehicle's charging system could not accommodate. Linda spent nearly 20 minutes trying to troubleshoot the problem, checking connections and attempting to adjust her setup in various ways. She even brought a small lamp from her garage to test whether the outlet was providing power at all, which it was for normal household usage. The lamp worked perfectly, but her Tesla charging system continued to malfunction whenever she tried to connect it. Finally, Linda gave up for the night and returned to her house, leaving Marcus feeling satisfied that his plan was working. She had encountered the first obstacle in her theft operation, and based on her reaction, she had no idea what was causing the problem. The power conditioning unit was invisible from the outside and had been installed inside Marcus's electrical panel where Linda would never see it. Marcus expected that Linda would likely try again the next night, probably assuming that the problem had been temporary. He was curious to see how persistent she would be, and how long it would take her to realize that her days of stealing electricity from her neighbor had come to an end. Saturday night brought a repeat performance from Linda, who appeared even more determined to make her stolen electricity work. Marcus watched from his window as she spent considerably more time examining the outlet and testing various connections. She had brought additional equipment with her this time, including what appeared to be a voltage meter and several different extension cords of varying lengths and capacities. Linda's troubleshooting efforts were more systematic this time, suggesting that she had done some research during the day about potential electrical problems. She tested the voltage at Marcus's outlet and seemed satisfied that power was available. She tried different extension cords and even attempted to use a surge protector between her cord and the outlet, apparently thinking that power fluctuations might be the issue. Despite her more sophisticated approach, the results were identical to the previous night. The power conditioning unit allowed normal electrical loads to function perfectly, while creating insurmountable problems for high-draw devices like electric vehicle chargers. Linda's Tesla would begin the charging process but then encounter constant interruptions and fluctuations that made sustained charging impossible. After nearly an hour of unsuccessful attempts, Linda's frustration was clearly visible. She stood in Marcus's yard, hands on her hips, staring at the outlet as if willing it to cooperate with her theft. Marcus found her reaction almost amusing, considering that she was essentially getting angry at an electrical outlet for not allowing her to steal electricity more effectively. Linda's persistence surprised Marcus, who had expected her to give up more quickly when faced with technical difficulties. Instead, she seemed to view the situation as a personal challenge that she was determined to overcome. This attitude reinforced his impression that Linda felt entitled to use his electricity and saw the outlet's malfunction as an obstacle to be conquered rather than a sign that she should stop stealing. Sunday night brought an escalation in Linda's efforts that bordered on the absurd. She arrived with what appeared to be a portable generator and an assortment of electrical equipment that suggested she was attempting to bypass whatever problem she believed existed with Marcus's outlet. Her setup was becoming increasingly complex and potentially dangerous, with multiple extension cords and electrical devices creating a web of connections across the space between their properties. Marcus became genuinely concerned about the safety implications of Linda's elaborate electrical setup. Her makeshift charging station was now a fire hazard that could potentially damage both of their properties. The irony was not lost on him that Linda, who positioned herself as a guardian of community safety standards, was creating a significant safety risk in her desperate attempts to continue stealing electricity. The power conditioning unit continued to work flawlessly, detecting and disrupting Linda's charging attempts regardless of how she tried to configure her equipment. However, Marcus began to worry that her increasingly complex setups might eventually find a way to bypass his protection system or cause damage to his electrical panel through feedback or overload conditions. On Monday morning, Marcus decided to escalate his own response. He contacted the HOA management company and filed a formal complaint about Linda's behavior, providing photographs and video evidence of her nighttime activities. He explained that she was not only stealing electricity but also creating safety hazards with her unauthorized electrical installations on community property. The HOA manager, Patricia Webb, was shocked by Marcus's evidence and assured him that such behavior was completely unacceptable for any resident, particularly a board member. She explained that utility theft was grounds for immediate action under the community's governing documents and that Linda could face significant fines or even removal from the HOA board if the allegations were substantiated. Patricia promised to investigate the matter immediately and to contact Linda for her response to the allegations. She also mentioned that she would involve the community's legal counsel if necessary to ensure that appropriate action was taken. Marcus felt encouraged by the HOA's swift response and their apparent willingness to take the matter seriously. Meanwhile, Linda's nighttime activities continued with increasing desperation. She had apparently concluded that Marcus's outlet was defective and began looking for alternative sources of electricity around the neighborhood. Marcus observed her examining other outdoor outlets and electrical connections, apparently searching for a new target for her theft. Tuesday night brought a disturbing development when Marcus saw Linda attempting to access the electrical meter on another neighbor's property. She was trying to connect her equipment directly to the external electrical connections, which was not only theft but also extremely dangerous. Such tampering with electrical meters could result in electrocution, fires, or serious damage to the electrical grid serving the entire neighborhood. Marcus immediately called the electric company's emergency line to report tampering with electrical meters. The dispatcher took the report seriously and promised to send a technician to investigate the following morning. She also mentioned that meter tampering was a felony in their jurisdiction and could result in criminal charges in addition to the civil penalties for utility theft. The next morning brought a visit from both the electric company, technician, and a representative from the HOA management company. The technician found clear evidence of attempted meter tampering and took photographs for their records. The HOA representative served Linda with a formal violation, notice and a summons to appear before the HOA board to address the allegations against her. Linda's reaction to these official visits was immediate and dramatic. She stormed over to Marcus's house and pounded on his front door, demanding to know why he was harassing her over what she called a minor misunderstanding. Her aggressive behavior and refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing convinced Marcus that his measured response had been appropriate and necessary. During their heated confrontation, Linda made several statements that Marcus carefully recorded on his smartphone. She admitted to using his electricity but claimed it was such a small amount that he was being unreasonable to complain about it. She also threatened to use her position on the HOA board to create problems for Marcus, including initiating violations and inspections of his property in retaliation for his complaints against her. Linda's threats and admission of guilt gave Marcus additional ammunition for the upcoming HOA board meeting. Her abuse of her board position for personal retaliation was clearly documented, and her own words provided confirmation of the theft that she had previously denied. Marcus felt confident that the evidence against Linda was overwhelming and that appropriate consequences would follow. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening, giving Linda just over a week to prepare her defense against the allegations. During this time, Marcus continued monitoring his electrical system and documenting any further attempts at theft or tampering. Linda's behavior had become increasingly erratic and desperate, suggesting that she was feeling the pressure from multiple sources. Wednesday night brought the most dangerous incident yet when Linda attempted to override Marcus's power conditioning system by connecting multiple high-powered devices to his outlet simultaneously. She had apparently theorized that the electrical protection system was designed to handle single large loads but might be overwhelmed by multiple smaller ones drawing power at the same time. Her approach involved connecting several space heaters and power tools through a complex arrangement of extension cords and power strips. The resulting electrical load was enormous and created exactly the kind of dangerous situation that Marcus's power conditioning unit was designed to prevent. The system responded by generating significant voltage fluctuations and ultimately triggering the circuit breaker for that outlet. The circuit breaker activation created a loud snapping sound and brief electrical arc that could be seen from Marcus's bedroom window. More importantly, the sudden power interruption while Linda was handling multiple electrical connections created a dangerous situation that could have resulted in electrocution or fire. Marcus immediately called the fire department to report the electrical hazard and potential safety risk. When the fire department arrived, they found Linda attempting to reset the circuit breaker at Marcus's electrical panel, which involved trespassing on his property and tampering with his electrical system. The fire marshal took a very serious view of the situation, particularly given the dangerous electrical setup that Linda had created and her unauthorized access to someone else's electrical panel. Linda was issued citations for both trespassing and creating an electrical hazard. The fire marshal also filed a report with the local police department, recommending that charges be filed for utility theft and reckless endangerment. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple neighbor dispute into a matter of public safety that required official intervention. The fire department's involvement brought additional scrutiny from the electric company, which sent an investigator to examine the entire situation. The investigator documented Linda's theft, her tampering attempts, and the safety hazards she had created through her increasingly desperate efforts to steal electricity. The electric company's report would become crucial evidence in any legal proceedings that might follow. Marcus felt vindicated by the official recognition of the serious nature of Linda's behavior. But he was also concerned about the escalating danger of her actions. What had started as simple theft had evolved into a pattern of increasingly reckless behavior that threatened the safety of the entire neighborhood. He realized that his power conditioning system, while effective at preventing the theft, had also pushed Linda toward more dangerous alternatives. Thursday evening's HOA board meeting was well attended, with many neighbors curious about the allegations against Linda and the unusual circumstances surrounding the case. Marcus had prepared a comprehensive presentation documenting Linda's theft, her escalation to dangerous behaviors, and the official responses from various agencies. His evidence was thorough and compelling, leaving little room for doubt about what had occurred. Linda's defense strategy was to minimize the severity of her actions while attacking Marcus's character and motives. She claimed that her use of his electricity was minimal, and that his complaints were motivated by personal animosity, rather than genuine concern about theft. She also argued that her position on the HOA board should be considered when evaluating the allegations against her. The other board members were clearly uncomfortable with Linda's defense and her attempt to use her position to deflect responsibility for her actions. Several members asked pointed questions about her admission to using Marcus's electricity without permission, and her threats to retaliate against him using her board authority. Her responses were evasive and often contradicted her previous statements. When Marcus presented the fire department's report and the electric company's investigation findings, the mood in the room shifted dramatically. The documentation of safety hazards and criminal citations made it clear that this was not a minor neighbor dispute, but a serious matter with potential legal consequences. Linda's attempts to downplay her behavior became increasingly untenable as the evidence mounted. The board's decision was unanimous. Linda was immediately removed from her position and faced significant fines for violating multiple community standards. She was also required to reimburse Marcus for his increased electrical costs and to pay for professional inspection and certification of all electrical work in her home. The board additionally imposed restrictions on her use of any electrical equipment that could be accessed from common areas. Linda's reaction to the board's decision was explosive. She accused the other members of bias and conspiracy, threatening to sue both the HOA and Marcus personally for what she characterized as harassment and discrimination. Her outburst confirmed the board's assessment that she was not suitable for a leadership position in the community and reinforced their decision to remove her immediately. Following the meeting, several neighbors approached Marcus to thank him for addressing Linda's behavior and to share their own experiences with her aggressive enforcement tactics. Many residents had been intimidated by Linda's position on the board and her threats of violations and fines for minor infractions. Her removal was seen as a positive development that would restore a more reasonable approach to community standards. The electric company representative who had attended the meeting informed Marcus that they would be installing a lockable cover on his outdoor outlet at no charge, given the circumstances of the case. They also mentioned that Linda's account would be flagged for monitoring to prevent future utility theft, and that any suspicious usage patterns would trigger immediate investigation. As Marcus drove home from the meeting, he reflected on how a simple observation of unusual electrical charges had led to the exposure of a neighbor's complex pattern of theft, endangerment, and abuse of authority. While he was satisfied with the outcome, he remained concerned about potential retaliation from Linda and the possibility that her desperate behavior might escalate further. The week following the HOA board meeting brought an unexpected period of quiet that Marcus found almost unsettling after months of nightly drama with Linda's electrical theft attempts. His power conditioning system continued to monitor the electrical usage at his outdoor outlet, but there had been no unauthorized access since the fire department incident and Linda's removal from the HOA board. Marcus assumed that Linda had finally accepted defeat and found alternative arrangements for charging her Tesla, possibly installing proper charging equipment at her own home, or using public charging stations. However, his assumption proved to be premature when he received a call from his insurance company on Tuesday afternoon asking about recent electrical work and safety incidents at his property. The insurance investigator explained that they had received a claim from Linda alleging that Marcus's electrical system had damaged her Tesla's battery during an attempted charging session. Linda was seeking compensation for what she claimed was thousands of dollars in battery replacement costs, arguing that Marcus had deliberately modified his electrical system to cause damage to her vehicle. Marcus was initially shocked by Linda's audacity in filing an insurance claim for damage that occurred during her theft of his electricity. However, as he reviewed the situation with the insurance investigator, he realized that Linda's claim might actually provide the final resolution to their conflict. Her admission that she had been using his electrical system, even in the context of claiming damages, constituted legal evidence of the theft she had previously denied. The insurance company's investigation required a detailed, technical analysis of Marcus's power conditioning system and its potential effects on electric vehicle charging systems. Marcus provided all documentation related to his installation, including the manufacturer's specifications and his own records of the system's operation during Linda's theft attempts. UCAR technical analysis revealed that Marcus's power conditioning unit was operating exactly as designed and within all legal and safety parameters. The controlled voltage fluctuations it generated when detecting unauthorized high-draw loads were specifically intended to prevent damage to electrical systems by disrupting improper connections before they could cause problems. More importantly, the investigation revealed that Linda's Tesla battery had not been damaged by Marcus's electrical system at all. The battery problems she was experiencing were the result of her own attempts to override the power conditioning system using multiple high-powered devices and improper electrical connections. Her dangerous electrical setup had created feedback loops and voltage spikes that damaged her own charging equipment and potentially affected her vehicle's battery management system. The insurance company's technical expert explained that electric vehicle batteries are designed to handle normal charging fluctuations, but Linda's makeshift electrical arrangements had created conditions far outside normal parameters. Her attempts to force charging through multiple simultaneous connections had generated precisely the kind of electrical chaos that could damage sophisticated electronic systems. Linda's insurance claim was not only denied but also flagged as potentially fraudulent, since she had admitted to illegal activity in the process of filing it. The insurance company forwarded their findings to local law enforcement, adding insurance fraud to the growing list of charges that Linda might face as a result of her actions. Meanwhile, the electric company had completed their investigation and filed formal charges against Linda for utility theft and meter tampering. The district attorney's office reviewed the extensive evidence provided by Marcus, the HOA, the fire department, and the electric company, ultimately deciding to prosecute Linda for multiple felonies related to her escalating pattern of theft and endangerment. The legal proceedings moved quickly once they began, largely because Linda's own statements and actions had provided overwhelming evidence of her guilt. Her recorded admission to using Marcus's electricity, combined with photographic and video evidence of her activities, made the theft charges straightforward to prove. The meter tampering and electrical hazard citations from official agencies provided additional support for the more serious charges. Linda's attempts to defend herself in court proved counterproductive, as she continued to minimize her actions and blame Marcus for the consequences of her own behavior. Her argument that the electricity she stole was just a small amount demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of both the legal and financial implications of her actions. The judge was particularly critical of her abuse of her HOA board position and her threats of retaliation against Marcus. The final resolution came in the form of a plea agreement that required Linda to pay substantial fines and restitution while accepting a criminal record for utility theft. She was required to reimburse Marcus for all of his increased electrical costs, the cost of his power conditioning system, and additional penalties for the time and expense involved in addressing her theft. The total amount exceeded $3,000, far more than she would have paid for proper electrical installation and charging costs. Linda was also required to install proper electrical service for her Tesla charging needs at her own expense, under supervision from both the electric company and local electrical inspectors. The installation costs, combined with the fines and restitution, made her theft scheme one of the most expensive approaches to charging an electric vehicle imaginable. The most satisfying aspect of the resolution for Marcus was not the financial compensation, but rather the vindication of his measured and legal response to Linda's behavior. He had documented everything carefully, responded proportionally to escalating threats, and relied on proper authorities rather than taking vigilante action. His power conditioning system had worked exactly as intended, protecting his property while exposing the theft without causing harm to anyone. In the months that followed, Marcus noticed a significant improvement in the neighborhood atmosphere. Linda's removal from the HOA board had eliminated the petty enforcement actions and intimidation tactics that had made many residents uncomfortable. The new board took a more reasonable approach to community standards while still maintaining the pleasant environment that made Willowbrook Heights an attractive place to live. Linda eventually moved away from the neighborhood, apparently unable to cope with the social consequences of her actions and the damage to her reputation within the community. Her house went on the market just 6 months after the legal proceedings concluded, and Marcus learned from other neighbors that she had struggled to maintain relationships with anyone who knew about her theft and the dangerous situations she had created. The new owners of Linda's former home were a pleasant retired couple who properly installed a level 2 charging station for their own electric vehicle within days of moving in. They approached Marcus to introduce themselves and apologize for any lingering concerns about electrical safety, having heard the story from their real estate agent. Marcus found their proactive approach refreshing and welcomed them warmly to the neighborhood. Marcus's power conditioning system remained in place, continuing to protect his electrical outlet from unauthorized use while providing surge protection for his own home's electrical system. The device had proven its worth not only in stopping Linda's theft but also in protecting his property from the electrical hazards she had created during her increasingly desperate attempts to bypass his security measures. The incident became something of a cautionary tale within the HOA community, shared during new resident orientations as an example of how small violations of community trust could escalate into serious legal and safety issues. The story served as a reminder that positions of authority within the community came with responsibilities that extended beyond rule enforcement to include personal integrity and respect for neighbors' rights. Marcus's monthly electric bills returned to their normal levels almost immediately after Linda's departure, confirming that her theft had indeed been the primary cause of his increased costs. The savings from eliminating her unauthorized usage more than covered the cost of his power conditioning system within the first year, making his investment in protecting his property financially beneficial as well as legally justified. Looking back on the entire experience, Marcus realized that his engineering background and methodical approach had been crucial to resolving the situation successfully. By documenting everything carefully, researching legal solutions, and working within proper channels, he had been able to stop Linda's theft while protecting himself from potential retaliation or legal complications. The neighborhood returned to its previous peaceful atmosphere, with residents able to focus on maintaining their properties and enjoying their community without the tension and conflict that Linda's behavior had created. The HOA board's more balanced approach to enforcement meant that minor violations were handled with education and cooperation rather than threats and intimidation. Marcus continued to serve as an unofficial resource for neighbors dealing with electrical issues or other technical problems, having gained a reputation as someone who could find practical solutions to complex challenges. His experience with Linda had demonstrated the value of patience, preparation, and persistence when dealing with difficult situations that required both technical knowledge and careful legal navigation. The power conditioning unit continued to function flawlessly, providing both protection and peace of mind. Marcus occasionally checked the system's logs to ensure it was operating properly, but there had been no further incidents of unauthorized electrical access since Linda's departure. The lockable outlet cover installed by the electric company provided an additional layer of security, though it had proven unnecessary given the effectiveness of the power conditioning system. Years later, Marcus would still occasionally receive questions from neighbors or HOA board members about electrical safety and protection systems, having become the community's unofficial expert on such matters. He was always happy to share his knowledge and help others protect their properties, though he hoped that no one else would need to deal with the kind of systematic theft and escalating dangerous behavior that he had experienced with Linda. The entire episode had reinforced Marcus's belief in the importance of good, neighbors, and community standards, while also demonstrating that those standards needed to be enforced fairly and legally when violations occurred. His measured response to Linda's theft had ultimately protected not just his own interests, but the safety and well-being of the entire neighborhood, making Willowbrook Heights a better place for everyone who lived there.